Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Phenomenology and the Theological Turn by Janicaud. We're going to continue on with our penultimate lesson. This is a response essay by Jean-Luc Marion, and Marion has a lot of content in his essay. We're going to break it down into two parts. We're going to take a look at block 1 and 2 in this lecture, and then we will have block 3 in the next lecture. It's pages 176 to 217, and it's a Jean-Luc Marion on saturated phenomena. And what I want to do, like I did last time, is I'm going to read some notes to begin with, and then we'll take a look at block 1 and 2, and then in the next lecture we'll look at block 3, and I will conclude with these same notes, because this will provide a summary for you. And I've titled it the 4 main moments of Marion's processing of phenomena. And the 4 moments are: phenomenon is framed as intuition; 2, consciousness fills the shortage of logic; 3, intuition is inscribed with eidos idea; and 4, return moment of constituting the self. And I'll go over each fine point now as I go through them again. We begin by phenomenon framed as intuition. Through the interplay of intuition and concept, the intellect grounds the phenomenon by rendering it intelligible. We bracket all presuppositions, and the phenomenon is accepted as unconditioned donation. But then we fill the shortage of logic in the intuition. It is intuited with its horizon. It is oriented toward eschatological future. And next, the intuition is measured. And it is measured in 3 ways. It is measured according to horizon, according to intentionality, and according to signification. In this way, donation has been led back into the self. Next, 3, intuition is inscribed with eidos idea. Phenomenon is thought and named as a sign or a concept. We seek equality between intuition and intentionality. Intentionality always exceeds intuition. The self constitutes the object as sign. And then something unique to Marion, I love this here. We form a cenotaph. It means the sign arising as the intuition fades away. It's called a cenotaph. It's like when you construct a statue to memorialize someone who's passed away. So, in a way, the intuition is passing away as a sign arises. So he calls that not just a sign, but a cenotaph. And then 4, we have the return moment of constituting the self. Eidos arises out of the glory of desire, but saturated phenomena constitute the self. We seek to create a unified, manifold sign model as a system of coordinates. Saturated phenomena, however, are distributed over several horizons within this system of coordinates because they already exist as the actual real, and they invert the relationship to the self. As revelation, they constitute the self in the return moment. So that gives us a summary starting point. Now we're going to look at block 1 and block 2, and then I'm going to give you those notes again at the conclusion of block 3 in the next lecture. So let's take a look at block 1, invisible phenomena. And Marion tells us that religious phenomena cannot be purely objectivized. Phenomena must be examined through the jurisdiction of possibility. Kant's definition: metaphysical possibility is that which agrees with the conditions of experience, including intuition and including concept. So under metaphysical possibility, agreement with intuition and concept, intuition reveals the form of phenomenality, its form of appearance. Intuition and concept determine in advance the possibility of the appearing phenomenon, all measured by the self's power of knowing. The play of intuition and concept within consciousness takes place to form this appearing of the phenomenon. So play within consciousness is what we're talking about in Note 3. Nothing happens without the attestation of knowing. Mind precedes that which it renders possible. Reason grounds and saves the phenomenon by rendering appearance as intelligible. Appearing does not belong to the thing that appears, it belongs to the rendering consciousness. So under Note 4, grounded and saved phenomena, the principle of all principles states that every intuition is a source of cognition, but within the limits within which it is given. It is never simply ungrounded brute actuality. Intuition is attested through itself. It shows itself on the basis of itself, but according to the principle of sufficient intuition. So let's take a look at that principle of sufficient intuition in Note 5. That means the phenomenon is accepted without any background, without any presupposition. We bracket presupposition. We accept it out of an unconditioned origin. This is called donation, the intuition giving itself in its full right of visibility. But we do couple that with our reasoning for appearance, which is that work of the consciousness and rendering the intuition as intelligible. So we take a look at reason for appearance in Note 6. Initially, the phenomenon is framed as an intuition, justified within the limits within which it is given. The limits are basically shortage of logic and a non-inscribed intentionality. It is exposed to a yet unknown experience, an eschatological future, so we still have this deficit of logic. So under Note 7, yet unknown experience, that includes a horizon of novelties within the flux of consciousness as horizons that are not yet looked at. Horizon exerts itself over existence. Horizon exerts itself over intuitions. It is the outside of experience. So under outside of experience, this is the horizon that seizes the outside. Therefore, all experience is grasped within the flux of consciousness and oriented in advance toward experience yet to arise. Marion says, therefore, donation of intuition is always conditioned by the flux of horizon. And under that notion of horizon, intuition is always given to the self, to the phenomenological self, as judge of appearance, as judge or measure of appearance. We measure in 4 parts. We measure the limit of intuition, we measure according to horizon, we measure according to intentionality, we measure according to signification. The phenomenon is reduced to the self through this 4-part measuring. So, reduced to the self in Note 10. We place the phenomenon within the limits of horizon, leading the donation back to the self. Donation is thought about according to horizon and according to the reduction to self, to free the possibility of its appearing. We inscribe the phenomenon with horizon, So under this notion of inscribing, some phenomena appear at the very limits as irreducible phenomenon. A phenomenon possesses a fundamental duality of appearance, and that appears, it's reflected as intention and intuition both. You've got that play between intention and intuition. Signification and fulfillment. So the intuition is a correlate of appearance. It is a correlate of appearance. Subjective appearing must correlate to objective appearing thing. That's the key. I'll say that again. Subjective appearing within consciousness must correlate to the objective appearing thing. Intellect becomes thought intention of sign fulfillment. It forms the signs of intentionality in order to define the true, in order to define the ideal. Phenomenon is thought and then named. Objective truth is achieved through subjective evidence of this work of consciousness. So we get our theological position laid out in block 1 here. Let's move on to block 2 and take a look at the ideal of existence. The ideal of existence, realized ideal, is due to the fact that the equality between intuition and intentionality needs to be achieved. This is an inescapable weakness of every phenomenon. Intentional object always exceeds intuitive donation. It remains to be constituted by the self. Intentionality is constituted by the self, by our work in consciousness, where consciousness considers the parallel between intuition and concept, or intuition and sign. And under that notion, in note 2, we constitute objectivity. Intuitions without concept are blind. We make intuitions intelligible as concepts or as signs. Real object is a synthesis of intuition and concept, holding both in balance. We hold intuition and sign in balance. That creates a real object. Note 3, block 2, note 3. Truth equals equality of intuition and concept. Receptivity as phenomenon and thought as concept both work together. Givenness of phenomenon is initially prioritized. Category, however, is a function of thought. Sign formation is a function of thought. So under this notion of the category, intuition conditions conceptual objectivization. Thought equals the relating of intuition to object. A thinking of all objects to measure the cenotaph sign of the phenomenon. Cenotaph. What is a cenotaph? I love this term that Marion gives us. A cenotaph is like a memorial statue that is erected to memorialize a deceased significant person. So he calls this a cenotaph. It's a sign that arises as the intuition is fading away. The intuition transitions to absence as the sign comes into being. I love that. Not just Samion sign, but cenotaph. I like that idea. So under note 5, sign is cenotaph. The cenotaph becomes the shadow of what the intuition cannot make appear. Intuition is inscribed with permanence of idea, the eidos. The eidos has no corresponding sensible object, becoming visible as the flower of thought, out of the glory of desire, out of the doxa glory of desire. So let's take a look at this notion of the glory of desire. Eidos idea is outside the conditions of phenomenality, outside the limit of intuition. Eidos idea is not sensible. Intuition functions under the rule of limitation. Concept represents the very lack of intuition. Intuition dies away as concept rises up. Under concept, note 7, intuition is an empty object without concept. Intuition is finite in its lack of ideal, in its lack of logic. Then it is reduced to finite objectivity. After that, it can enter into the constituting horizon, work of the self. And after we get to this, realizing that processing phenomenon results in inscribing a phenomenon with eidos idea, then Marion posits the question in Block 2, Note 8. Can there be a non-finite intuition? Can there be an intuition that is beyond this chain of events in processing phenomena? Is there a phenomenon that is absolutely possible? It would be saturated with intuition, which gives immeasurability, a concept of the supersensible, representing the object according to principle. So note 9, it becomes an intuition of imagination. The eidos idea is temporarily suspended. The eidos idea is temporarily suspended. Because of the overabundance of the given, which temporarily blinds us, like Paul on Damascus Road. So this becomes an aesthetic idea that we form, because it's imaginative. It is representation as working imagination. Just beyond concept, language never reaches it completely. That's why I prefer using sign rather than concept. I think it's better to use the term of sign rather than concept. That's my own preference, however. Marion uses concept. I like using sign because a sign points beyond itself. It points to that which is beyond concept. That's my preference. But if you look at Block 2, Note 10, the representation of imagination, excess of donation furnishes much to think about. It remains an inexposable representation of the work of imagination. The aesthetic sign gives more than it can expose. Sign becomes saturated concept, overexposed and invisible. So note 11, sign as overexposed and invisible by the excess of its light, operating according to a saturated phenomena. The character of a saturated phenomena is excess of intuition, excess of donation, and transcending the aim of concept. In other words, for me, that defines a sign. So Block 2, Note 12, description of saturated phenomena. The characteristics are quantitatively invisible, qualitatively unbearable, relationally absolute. Invisible, unbearable, absolute, and beyond modality. Saturated phenomena cannot be aimed at, it cannot be foreseen. Therefore, saturated phenomena are not foreseen by an aggregate of parts. It surpasses sum of parts. It is incommensurable. It appears as an instantaneous synthesis, stretching beyond possibility, stretching beyond extrapolated possibilities. That's going to give us our Block 1 and 2. Next, we're going to take a look at Block 3, and I will give you those summary notes again.